Welcome to This Explainer. Look, the world our kids are going to inherit, it's going to look totally different from the geopolitical map we see today. We're diving straight into the data to map out exactly how the global power structure shifts by 2050.
So, what's that world order actually going to look like? Are we still talking about one dominant superpower running the show, or are we barreling toward a completely new multipolar reality? Well, the data really only points in one direction.
Here's our roadmap for today. We're going to map out global influence in 2050, check in on the future giants, that's the US, China, and India, look at traditional powers in decline, touch briefly on Latin America, and then see what all of this means for the Arab world.
All right, part one, the shift to Asia. The numbers show a hard pivot from a unipolar system to a multipolar world, with economic gravity shifting way over to the east.
So what do we actually mean by a multipolar world? Basically, it's a global system where power isn't just hoarded by one or two nations. It's spread out. By 2050, global gravity is projected to be anchored by three distinct giants: the US, China, and India. And that is going to fundamentally rewrite international relations.
Let's move to part two and look a little closer at the big three driving this new era.
When you put these three heavyweights side by side, it's wild how differently their dominance is distributed. You've got the US leading massive military spending and R&D. Then there's China, rivaling that tech innovation, but with a massive economy. And then there's India. They are the ultimate wildcard here, with a demographic boom that absolutely dominates the future population landscape.
Let's break that down a bit. The US keeps its military edge with a staggering $954 billion spent in 2025 alone. I mean, that is more than the next several countries combined. Back that up with 5,200 nuclear warheads, and yeah, their hard power is pretty secure. But, and it's a big but, rising public debt and internal polarization, those are the Achilles heels that could seriously threaten that top spot.
Then we have China, which is honestly a fascinating paradox. On one hand, you have this incredible economic explosion. They're projected to hit 20% of the entire global GDP by 2050 and lead the world in tech patents. But underneath all that success, a severe demographic time bomb. Their population is actually projected to shrink down to 1.31 billion, leaving them with the crushing economic burden of a rapidly aging workforce.
Now, contrast that shrinking workforce with India. We are talking about 1.67 billion people by 2050. This skyrocketing, incredibly young population gives them a massive demographic dividend. While the rest of the world gets older, India is going to have the workers. If they can clear some infrastructure hurdles and pump money in education, this youth boom is going to rocket them into an absolute powerhouse position.
All right, section three. While these new giants rise up, the historic powerhouses of Europe and Russia are facing a much rougher road ahead.
For the European Union, the data is pretty stark. They're looking at an aging population that's plateauing around 460 million, and because of that, their share of the global GDP is projected to shrink to under 10%. Now, Europe is still going to be a highly advanced regulatory and green tech leader, for sure, but their actual slice of the global economic pie, it's getting much, much smaller.
Russia's looking at a very similar dilemma. Look, they're still a formidable military threat. Over 5,000 nuclear warheads and massive energy leverage is nothing to sneeze at. But economically, they are totally stagnating. Their population is shrinking down to 131 million, and they're stuck with a slow 1% to 2% economic growth rate that is heavily reliant on fossil fuels. So their global economic footprint is going to stay severely limited.
Moving on to section four, Latin America. This is a region defined by absolutely incredible potential, but also significant fragmentation.
Latin America's story is really one of ununified wealth. They've got a growing population that's projected to hit 770 million and vast reserves of future critical resources. I'm talking copper, lithium, huge agricultural power. They literally have all the right ingredients. But because they lack central leadership and real economic integration, they're likely going to remain vital resource hubs for the other giants, rather than forming a unified superpower themselves.
And finally, section 5. The Arabs' position in this new order. Let's bring all this home. What do these massive seismic global shifts actually mean for the strategic future of the Arab world?
The most striking data point here is 600 million. The Arab world is right on the edge of a massive demographic boom, which creates an incredibly powerful consumer market. But at the exact same time, it starts a desperate ticking clock. They're going to need to provide jobs, education, and services to support that massive youth bulge, and fast.
The real challenge here is the stark contrast within the region itself. On one side, you have the Gulf Cooperation Council, sitting on immense wealth and roughly 45% of global oil reserves. That gives them the flexible financial power to literally buy their way into the future. But right next door, you've got densely populated nations like Egypt and Iraq that are super vulnerable. They are facing dire, immediate threats from climate change and critical water scarcity.
So how do they survive and thrive in this changing landscape? Our sources outline a clear 4-part survival guide. First, they absolutely have to diversify their economies away from oil. Second, they need to unify regionally to actually leverage that 600 million person market. Third, it's about walking a tightrope, carefully balancing partnerships between the traditional West and the rising East. And finally, they need to pour massive investments into the infrastructure of tomorrow, specifically green energy and AI.
Which leaves us with a critical question to end on. Will the Arab region adapt and unify to harness its massive potential in this new multipolar reality, or will it just remain a fragmented chessboard for the giants of 2050 to play on? The policy choices made today are going to entirely shape that future. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep asking the big questions about our changing world.